Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of True Drew Podcast. I hope you guys are having a great summer. I actually just got back from a vacation, which was much needed. It was really fun, and I actually got to do some thrifting and find some Nancy Drew books, so that was really awesome. I love anytime I get to find Nancy Drew books out in the wild. But I hope you all have had a chance to relax and have some fun this summer and hopefully read some Nancy Drew books or even find some to fill in the gaps in your collection. And if you're still looking for some of those Nancy Drew books that are elusive and hard to find, I've got you covered. You can always check out my website, which is www.truedrewpodcast.com. I have so much fun not only finding these books, but helping you all complete your collections. Because let's be honest, some of these books are incredibly hard to find. Now, on to the specific Nancy Drew book that we're going to be discussing today for episode 93. The book we're going to be talking about is The Mysterious Image, and it is book number 74, and it was first published in 1984. Now, it's kind of funny, this book being called The Mysterious Image, there's several books in the Nancy Drew series that have similar titles. There's also a book called The Clue in the Camera. There's a later book coming up called The Picture Perfect Mystery, and there's also The Case of the Photo Finish. So these I'm hoping have different plots to them because that's a lot of similar sounding titles, so I guess we'll see. Also, those other books I mentioned are number 82, 94, and 96. I just thought it was kind of interesting that they have similar titles and they fall pretty close together in the series too. Now, as far as the separate book covers for this book goes, The Mysterious Image, there are two that I was able to find, and the first one is done by Hector Garrido. I'm not sure of the artist for the second book cover, but if you ever want to see these book covers that I discuss, I always post them on my Instagram, True Drew Podcast, on Wednesdays before these episodes come out on Thursdays. So the first cover edition for this book is one that I have on my own bookshelf. It's a green book with some blue accents, and Nancy herself is wearing a very pretty turquoise blue jacket. It's very tailored looking, and she's holding a ripped photograph, and in the background we see some pine trees. We see a woman bent over like she's digging a hole in the forest, and there's a creepy shadowy figure standing over her. It's a really dark, ominous cover, and I really love Nancy's hair in this cover in particular. It's very true, like strawberry blonde, and it's kind of in these ringlets and pinned back. It's really pretty. And the second edition of this book cover, I believe, is a later edition, probably from the 90s or late 80s, and Nancy's wearing this light blue sundress, and she's carrying a little white purse, and we can see her going towards a door, and in the reflection of the glass on that door, there's a man taking her picture. And this is a direct scene from the book, so it's cool that they used that for the cover. Now, I came up with a funny cover spoof for these covers, and I just said, exposing criminals is my favorite pastime. Nancy Drew loves to put those bad guys in jail. Now, as far as giving these book covers a rating, I would probably give them 2 magnifying glasses. The first one, I might give like 2.5 to 3. I really like Nancy's outfit, her hair, and how dark and creepy that cover is. Okay, now without further ado, let's talk about some of the characters that we see in this book, The Mysterious Image. So first up, we have a Dr. Hugh Jaffe, who's a psychologist. We have Oliver Snell, who's the art director for Mark Joplin Inc., which is a company we encounter in the book. Rick Hyatt, who's a photographer. Roscoe Leff, who's a copywriter. Ted Yates, he is an executive for a company called Stratton, and John Stratton is the president of that company. There's a woman named Sylvia Salmo, who's a dancer. Barry Coe, who's a Broadway producer. I feel like I need to say that like they do in the musical The Producers. Pete Dornack, who's a tech guy. Eli Jackson, I don't have any notes in parentheses next to his name. Takeshi, the houseman. I love how these people have housemen. It's so interesting to me. Dallas Curry, who's a famous photographer. Claire Grant, who's a famous actress. Pamela Kane, who is Claire Grant's friend, Mr. and Miss Fife, who are these homeowners that rent their house out to Claire Grant, Miss Barrow, who is the Fife's housekeeper, Detective Hoyt, Marcy Keach, who's a journalist, and Mr. Knapp, who's the vice president of Darby and Wallace. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to keep up with, so don't worry. I'm going to tell you why they're important and how they factor into this mystery. But first, I'll read a quick synopsis on this book. A famous advertising photographer calls on Nancy and her father Carson Drew to help him when he is accused of pirating his colleague's work. When a young actress known to have worked with Nancy's client disappears just as she's about to land a starring role in a new Broadway play, Perfect Strangers, Nancy knows she's dealing with ruthless and devious criminals. The police turn to Nancy for help in finding the missing woman. Some video cassettes, sent anonymously through the mail, may hold a vital clue. But before Nancy can unravel the mystery, a friend of the missing actress is lured into a terrifying trap, and Nancy must face one of her most unnerving confrontations. And now for a dramatically read newspaper headline synopsis. Actress fakes disappearance and famous photographer's career almost sabotaged through subliminal messaging. Okay, so now let's jump into some of the direct quotes and notes that I took down for the mysterious image. So this book begins with Nancy and Carson discussing a new case over breakfast, and I feel like they do this a lot, and for the record, I would love to be in the Drews household around breakfast time because first of all, you know that Hannah Gruen is an excellent cook, but it would also be really cool to witness some of Nancy and Carson's banter and also discussing mysteries. I think that would be so neat. But Carson says that he's defending Dallas Curry, a friend of his who is a famous ad photographer, and recently he's been accused of copying other photographers' work, and Carson mentions that he might need Nancy's help. Now, at about that time, the phone rings, and it's Chief McGinnis on the line, and he says he has a mystery for Nancy also. And according to him, there's this actress, Claire Grant, who is a famous Broadway actress, and she's gone missing in River Heights, and the police can't investigate until she's been gone for 24 hours. But Claire's best friend, this woman named Pamela Kane, is raising a huge stink, and Claire went missing from this house that belongs to Mr. and Miss Fife, and they live on Possum Road, according to Chief McGinnis. And they're away, they're somewhere on vacation or something, and they let Claire stay there. But their housekeeper, Miss Barrow, is overseeing things while they're gone, so I guess they were like, yeah, it's okay if you stay in our house. So Chief McGinnis's hands are kind of tied. He can't help look for this woman until she's been missing for a little bit longer, so Nancy agrees to help. Now, when Nancy goes over to the Fifes' house, she talks to someone named Detective Hoyt and Pamela Kane, who's Claire's best friend, and Miss Barrow, the housekeeper for the Fifes. And according to Pamela, she was coming to see Claire, but when she got to the house and Miss Barrow went to tell Claire that she was there, she found her room empty with the window wide open, so Claire Grant was nowhere to be seen. And Miss Barrow, the housekeeper, says that the last time she talked to Claire was at 1:30 a.m. when she thought she heard noises and saw someone outside. So Claire was apparently spooked by somebody possibly being on the property, and Miss Barrow assured her that nobody was there. So this is already not looking too good. It's sounding like possibly Claire could have been kidnapped. And Pamela, Claire's friend, is obviously kind of following this train of thought also because she knows that her friend was receiving threats. So Nancy, Pamela, and the detective look behind the house in the woods and they find a picture of Claire, or rather a piece of a picture that's been ripped up, and they also find footprints, which is really kind of odd, kind of creepy. This sounds, it just seems like a stalker type of incident. So the three of them piece together the photo, and it's of Claire, and she's dressed like the Statue of Liberty, and Nancy says it was an ad for an evening gown company. So Nancy and Pamela, after gathering that evidence, go inside to talk, and Pamela says that Claire has had some good breaks and some flops in her acting career, and Pamela wants to be an actress too. Mostly, Nancy just reassures her that they'll find her friend no matter what it takes. So after doing this investigating, Nancy goes home, and Hannah says that her dad wants her to call, but first Nancy goes to answer the door because someone's there, and a mailman gives her an unmarked package, and inside is an unmarked video cassette. Nancy Drew gets some of the strangest mail. I guess at least it's not a bomb this time. So Nancy calls Carson back, but he's already gone to the courthouse, and his secretary, Miss Hanson, says he wants Nancy to meet him and Dallas Curry for lunch at a place called the Fisherman's Net. Now, after Nancy hangs up, she goes to play the video cassette that she got in the mail, and it's just a bunch of rock music videos, and Nancy wonders if one of her friends is playing a prank on her. Because according to the book, Nancy is a fan of classical and pop music, but she's not too big of a fan of rock. I just knew that Nancy was like an easy music kind of listener, like she has that vibe about her. Not to say that Beethoven didn't have some bangers back in the day. I mean, there's still bangers today, but you know what I mean. Now, we also get a description of Nancy's outfit that she wears to lunch, and I just love when we get these little tidbits about the fashion because I think it's so cool. But she's wearing a sleeveless blue linen dress and a white straw handbag. So Nancy, Carson, and Dallas Curry have lunch together, and then they go back to Carson's office to talk. And Dallas shows them the first ad that he ran that was copied, and it's this picture of Claire Grant that Nancy found in the woods near the Fife home where she was dressed as the Statue of Liberty. And the ad copying has happened 3 times total, and Dallas has always had the copycat ads come out just before his actual ad is set to release. Now, the second instance where Dallas had his ads copied, it featured knights around a round table, and then the third ad that was copied was these models whose heads were superimposed on flowers for a cosmetic ad. And every time it's a different ad agency or photographer, so it's going to be hard to pin down who is copying Dallas Curry and why. Nancy also finds out during this meeting that Dallas Curry knows Claire Grant fairly well. They struck up a friendship after the photo shoot, and he's worried about her disappearance. So Nancy leaves her father to talk with Mr. Curry, and once out on the street, she notices a lanky blonde man taking her picture, and she recognizes him because he was sitting a few tables over from them while they were eating lunch at the Fisherman's Net, and he runs when she approaches him and jumps in a yellow convertible. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't like somebody taking my photograph in an unauthorized way. Like, if you ask, that's one thing, but just, it's so weird. So Nancy goes and jumps in her car, and the chase is on, but as she's in pursuit and goes to turn down another street, she almost hits a pedestrian and has to hit the brakes, and guess who it is? It's Ned Nickerson. So Nancy literally almost mowed down her boyfriend with her car. Like, just, or her special friend, if you want to go by what some of the books call him. But it's so crazy because Ned apologizes. I'm like, he was the one to step off the curb, yeah, but still, like, Nancy's the one that almost hit you with an automobile, so I don't think an apology's necessary. But that's such a Ned thing to do. Like, sorry, I almost got hit by your car, Nancy. Oh, Ned. But Ned hops in the car and they continue on, but Nancy has lost the yellow convertible at this point, so they stop and get milkshakes instead. And Ned tells Nancy he's been offered a summer job at an advertising agency, but he's not sure if he wants to take it. I feel like I'm mentally always adding to Ned's like skill set list because, like, okay, he knows football, he sells insurance on the side, now he's possibly gonna get into advertisement, and I think he also like was a really good engineer, or he was like into science in that one book, The Glowing Eye Mystery. So yeah, Ned has his own like little list of skills alongside Nancy's very vast list of skills. Oh yeah, and he's a part-time camp counselor. I forgot that one. So anyways, Nancy and Ned chat about her case, and then Nancy drops Ned off at the ad agency. And we get confirmation that Ned is 6 foot tall here. I think they've mentioned his height in previous books, but Nancy and Ned promise to meet later for a dinner date. Now, Nancy goes home and she finds Bess and George at her house, and she asks them if they sent her a video cassette with rock music videos on it as a joke, and they say no, and Nancy already knows that Ned didn't send it to her because she asked him over milkshakes and he said no. So Nancy's even more puzzled. She's like, who sent me this tape? This is so odd. Now after this, Nancy asks Bess and George to go on a walk with her, and Bess is less than enthusiastic and says she doesn't want to go on a hike. And of course, we have George here being a jerk, and she says, listen, my little butterball of a cousin, you need the exercise more than either of us do. So come on, be a sport. Ugh. George is, I've said it before, but the worst. Why can't George just be nice to her cousin? That's all I'm asking. So anyways, Nancy, Bess, and George drive to the Fifes' house because Nancy wants to look for more clues in the woods, and the book says that Bess is actually excited about that part and possibly finding clues to Claire Grant's kidnappers if she has been kidnapped. And I thought this was kind of out of character because a lot of times Bess is like, no, Nancy, I don't want to go solve mysteries. I don't want to go snooping around in the woods and possibly encountering monitoring villains. Like, that sounds horrible. Don't sign me up for that. But they do find some tire tracks. So Nancy, Bess, and George come to this rickety bridge over this roaring creek, and I bet you can see where this is going. But this is so funny because Nancy and Bess stand there and they question the structural integrity of the bridge, and then George is like, "Don't be scaredy cats," and she just charges right across, which is totally in character for George, so bravo, George. And that works about as well for her as you think it does. And the bridge collapses and George falls. And, well, all I gotta say is, see you later, George. It was nice knowing you. So George is just dangling from what's left of this bridge, and luckily a fisherman comes along and he and Nancy help George up and keep her from falling completely in this river because she would have been swept away to who knows where. But after that whole ordeal, Nancy and the girls head back to her car, and Nancy comments that a car never would have made it over that bridge because it was so fragile, but the tire tracks they saw looked like they went on towards Highway 19. But now Nancy's thinking that they probably came from Possum Road near the Fifes instead, so someone was deliberately trying to cover their tracks and mislead investigators. Now, when Nancy gets back to the car, she finds a note on her car's windshield, and it has the initials CG and ND with slashes through them. So could it mean Claire Grant and Nancy Drew? Is this a direct threat to Nancy now? That's very spooky. So after this, they drive back past the Fifes' house, and there's a news van there. And it's funny because the book says it says video news on the side. Like, they had to specify video news. Like, this is not a news van with like a bunch of newspapers in the back of it. Like, we have to clarify this is the video news. I love these books so much. So Nancy's car starts to shake at about this time, and they have to go to a service station because it's not a Nancy Drew book without Nancy having car problems, which is honestly so relatable. But her tire is low, and someone stuck a matchstick in the valve to let air out deliberately. And so Nancy gets her tire replaced, and then she takes Bess and George home, and then she gets ready for her date with Ned because that still hasn't happened. We've packed so much in the last couple hours. I mean, we've done some investigating, there's been a bridge collapse, you know, it's just your average Tuesday. And we get another description of what Nancy's wearing. Apparently to this date she wears a white cotton summer dress, and Nancy and Ned go to a Chinese restaurant called Chan's. I just love the details in these books. So after dinner, Nancy talks to Carson, who waited up for her, and she confesses that she doesn't think that she fully believes Dallas Curry's story about his ads being stolen. And there's been some foreshadowing of this throughout the book, like Dallas Curry will be talking and it says that Nancy just doesn't believe what he's saying, which that would be a moral dilemma for me, to be representing someone or helping someone that you might not think is in the right. So the next day, Nancy and Bess go to pick up her other tire that was being patched at the service station, and she asks the owner if he knows anyone with an off-road vehicle in the area because of the tire tracks they found, and he says they could have been made with his vehicle. He says he left his truck in a certain spot and it was clean, but now it's caked in mud, like somebody drove it through some woods or something. But the weird thing is that the service station owner also verifies that he locks the truck at all times and keeps the key on him, and the spare key is locked up in the station. So after this, Nancy and Bess next go to see Pamela Kane, who is being interviewed by a journalist named Marcy Keach, who just knows that she's going to solve Claire Grant's disappearance. There's always someone out there that thinks they're smarter than Nancy Drew, and they're always wrong. So Bess innocently asks if she already knows what happened to the actress, and Marcy Keach says she got snatched. That's what happened. Now, I know this is in the context of being kidnapped, but it made me think of the slang term, like from nowadays, like snatched, like girl got snatched means something completely different these days. Like now it's seen as a positive, back then not so much. So Nancy, Marcy, and Pamela speculate about Claire's whereabouts, with Nancy being more certain that the kidnappers are trying to mislead them, and Claire could still be in River Heights, and she cites the unstable bridge. But Pamela and Marcy don't like that theory. In fact, Marcy says Nancy is so used to her small town amateurish mystery dabbling that she doesn't realize more serious crimes get committed every day. Excuse me, what? Like, Nancy has literally caught jewel thieves, she has busted entire crime rings, like, woman needs to step down. But Marcy reinforces her theory that it's a bigger crime than they think it is by showing Nancy a can of ether that was found under Claire's window and probably used to subdue her. And Nancy's just like, okay, like, that's nice, but it's kind of odd because she and Detective Hoyt looked all around for clues under the window and they didn't find the can of ether. So was it planted? Why does Marcy even have it? I'm sure sure Nancy in the back of her mind also has to be thinking like, I would have found that. I know for a fact that this crazy journalist wouldn't have found it before I did. So Marcy says she's going to turn it over to the police, and Nancy sweetly tells her it's probably covered in fingerprints now, her own fingerprints. So Marcy huffs and flops into a chair all dramatically, and she sits on a chocolate bar that fell out of Bess's purse that gets all over her skirt. That's right, Marcy Keach, go get in your video news van and leave us all alone. Also, you might want to get that dry cleaned. So at this point in the book, I was really suspicious of Pamela Kane because she kept insisting that Claire was in danger, and she's an actress. Who's to say this whole thing wasn't a stunt that was orchestrated by her? So Nancy actually has a similar idea. So she asks if Carson can find someone to dig up more on Pamela Kane. Now, in the meantime, Nancy goes to New York to Darby and Wallace Advertising Agency, the one that produced the Statue of Liberty ad, and she talks to the vice president, Mr. Knapp, and Roscoe Leff, the chief copywriter, and Rick Hyatt, the photographer. And Roscoe says he came up with the initial idea, and when Rick Hyatt walks in, Nancy is shocked because he's the man who took her picture in River Heights and ran off in a yellow convertible. So Nancy instantly confronts him, and Rick gets defensive and says he was taking pictures of Nancy, her dad, and Dallas Curry on his day off. Sir, that's still stalking. It doesn't matter if you were doing it on your day off or in your spare time. It's still really, really creepy. Nancy can also get the sense of the fact that Rick is incredibly jealous of Dallas Curry while she's talking to him too, and the other two men take him to task after Nancy leaves. So after this, Nancy next pays a visit to the Stratton Agency, another ad agency, which did the Knights and Round Table ad, and she speaks to an account executive there named Ted Yates and the president, John Stratton. And they both say that there was a break-in around the same time that the ad was stolen. Now, the last agency on Nancy's list is Mark Joplin Incorporated, and Nancy talks to Oliver Snell there, the firm's art director, who says he came up with the flower face ad but is going to testify in the case, so he doesn't want to talk. Nancy, of course, is disappointed by this because she doesn't feel like she's learned anything, so she heads home. And when she gets home, she tells Hannah and her dad that she may go see Dallas Curry, but as she goes to leave, she finds Bess and George on the front porch. And Bess tells Nancy that Marcy Keach has released a news story claiming that she made the discovery about the tire tracks, to which I said, oh no, she didn't. And Nancy's annoyed by this, but she keeps her cool and invites her friends along to go talk to Dallas Curry with her. At this point in my notes, I wrote down that the book says Dallas Curry has a Japanese houseman, and I just put okay. The term houseman is so odd to me. We've heard it in other books, like I think the revised text of Password to Larkspur Lane, Helen's, I think, grandparents had a houseman. It's just such a weird term to me. I don't know. But Nancy, Bess, and George talk and hang out for a while with Dallas Curry discussing the case, and Dallas shows them a videotape of some rock bands, and it was also sent anonymously to him in the mail, just like Nancy's. And while they're talking about this, Dallas says he's photographed the bands in the video. So after they leave, Bess and George say they believe Dallas Curry isn't a thief, and Nancy isn't so sure. She's still on the fence, and she's like, I just don't know if I believe this guy. So the next day, Nancy talks to Chief McGinnis, who has been checking with taxi cabs in the area for leads on Claire Grant, but there's no luck. He hasn't found where Claire Grant has used a taxi cab anytime recently. So the next note that I took down, Carson tells Nancy he's found the name of one of Pamela Kane's roommates in LA during his research, and her name is Sylvia Salmo, and she's moved to New York to try and make it on Broadway. So Nancy says she'll go up to New York and look into her. Now, when Nancy goes to see Pamela again, she says she found a phone number in Claire's things, and when Nancy tries to call it, Oliver Snell picks up, the art director of Mark Joplin Incorporated, who said he couldn't talk to Nancy because he was testifying in Dallas Curry's case against him. The plot thickens. So Nancy quickly hangs up and Pamela gets upset, but Nancy explains it's better not to tip him off and question him again in person. So next, Nancy goes to Ashton University and talks to a Dr. Hugh Jaffe, a research psychologist, and she wants to see if it's possible that Dallas Curry may have been subliminally exposed to similar images over time, and that's why there's this discrepancy of the ads being stolen. So Dr. Jaffe talks about thought transference, or even the possibility of people just having similar ideas around the same time. Now, it's at this point that Bess and George say they don't believe Dallas Curry now. For whatever reason, they've changed their tune on him. But Nancy next has lunch with Bess and George, and she sets up an interview with the Broadway producer of Perfect Strangers, the play that Claire Grant was hoping to be in, named named Barry Coe, and Bess says she'll fly to New York with Nancy. Now, once they get there, Nancy asks Barry about Claire Grant, and he wasn't even aware she's been missing because he's been traveling. And he also says he wasn't really set on giving her the part for Perfect Strangers, which is news to Nancy because she thought she was a shoo-in for it. And to hear Pamela, Claire's friend, talk about it, she said that Claire had the part. It was as good as hers. Barry also tells Nancy where she might find Sylvia Salmo, Claire Grant's ex-roommate, at auditions for a musical in the city, and he gives Nancy the information of Dwayne Weiss, the casting director. So at this point in the book, there's also a reference to the Yellow Pages, which really dates this book. I actually love it though because I'm old enough to remember the Yellow Pages. I used to like looking in the telephone book to see like how many people with the name Smith were in there. That was like peak entertainment in the 90s. But anyways, Nancy and Bess have no luck contacting Dwayne or locating Sylvia, so they go eat at a place called Lily's and look at pictures of famous patrons on the wall, and there's one of Claire Grant. And Nancy can't help but feel like she's seen her in person before somewhere, even though she's never met her in person, so that's kind of odd. But after giving up on New York, Nancy and Bess go watch a rock concert that George is helping with the lighting on, and Nancy and Bess go back out to Nancy's car afterwards, and she opens the door and a loud explosion goes off. Oh my gosh, I spoke too soon, there's a bomb. And this guy from inside the concert, his name is Pete Dornack, and he's dating George's friend, but I doubt we'll ever see him again after this, identifies some wires under Nancy's car door and says it was a cherry bomb, like a rigged firecracker. I love these minor characters that drift and float into the Nancy Drew books, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, that's an ancient Aztec carving, and then they just disappear. They dip. They're like, bye, and you never see them again. But anyways, Nancy's car had a bomb under it. Like, who put that there? Someone devious. Now, after everybody's calmed down from that, Nancy talks to Dr. Jaffe again, the psychologist, about the experiment he was conducting when she saw him the other day. His students were like listening to something on headsets and reading books at the same time, and they were tested on their comprehension and how much they remembered. And they also talk about subliminal messaging and how unethical advertisers can flash images so fast that the eye doesn't register them, but the brain does. I seem to remember when McDonald's got in hot water over this, like during a Super Bowl one year, their image was flashed so fast that people barely perceived it, but it does happen. So Nancy's beginning to think that the mysterious VHS tapes that she got in the mail and Dallas Curry received may have a more sinister purpose to them. Could Dallas Curry have had the advertising images flashed to him in between those rock music videos, and could something negative about Dallas Curry been on the tape that Nancy received? Because Bess and George now don't believe him after watching the tape that Nancy received. So Nancy goes to visit Dallas Curry and get his tape. Oh, and apparently at this point we learned that his houseman has a name. His name is Takeshi, which is much better than being just called a houseman all the time. But Nancy gets the tapes and says the Statue of Liberty ad was obviously leaked because the photo was found in the woods. Who else would have had access to those photos? And then Dallas Curry casually mentions that he thinks Claire might have been dating Ted Yates, who works at the Stratton agency. So Nancy next takes the tapes to Pete Dornack. Hey, he does come back up again, so he can examine them. But when Nancy talks to Pamela Kane again, she's insistent that Claire didn't date Ted. Okay. Pamela seems to be just really informed on Claire's life, but I don't know if I believe anything that she's saying. So Nancy next calls around to the ad agencies again that are accusing Curry of stealing their ideas, and they're hostile to her at this point. And Mr. Knapp tells Nancy that Roscoe left, tried to start his own ad agency, but had to give up on it. Is he bitter about it? Maybe he's bitter about Dallas Curry's success. So Pete Dornack does find several hidden messages on one of the VHS tapes, like Dallas Curry is a cheat and thief, Dallas Curry steals other people's ideas, and then the message that Curry is guilty, guilty, guilty. And Curry's tape, not surprisingly, has the ad images that he was accused of copying. So the next note that I wrote down is George goes on a tennis date with Bert, and I said he's back, folks, because I got a little worried a few episodes ago when he wasn't mentioned, but Bert is still around, guys. He's still playing tennis, he's still hanging out with George, so he's okay. I was really worried there for a second. I'm invested in these side characters, y'all. Now, the next thing that I wrote down is Pamela Kane is too helpful, and it's at this point that she also accuses Oliver Snell of being involved in Claire's disappearance when she, Nancy, and Snell go to lunch. So I think Pamela and Claire are the same person. This was the next thing that I wrote down because I was like, this is just too weird. Why does Pamela seem to be so invested in Claire's life and know all this inside information information. Like, I mean, a best friend might know some of that stuff, but some of it probably not. So after that lunch, which had to have been really, really awkward, Nancy goes to talk to a guy named Eli Jackson, who says he knows of Roscoe Leff and Oliver Snell, and in fact, he says Dallas Curry was called on to vote on whose work was better, and he voted for neither of them. So that's two potential enemies right there. That had to have been a hit to their egos. So Nancy and George next find themselves in New York again, and they go visit Sylvia Salmo, who looks incredibly similar to Pamela Kane, but with blonde hair and pixie glasses. And Bess and George were supposed to meet Pamela at the hotel she's staying at, and conveniently, she's not there. You know what they say about being at different places at the same time? Yeah, you can't. You can't do that. So Nancy and George wait around the hotel, and Nancy reads some articles that Dr. Jaffe sent her about subliminal perception, and she finds one of them was written by Oliver Snell. So Nancy suddenly has this idea, and she goes to talk to the concierge, who told them earlier that Pamela got a note and had to leave. So Nancy finds the note in the trash, and it says, "Miss Kane, be at the tower at 8 tonight, and I will give you sensational evidence in the Claire Grant case. Come alone or it's no deal." And Nancy realizes that it's a tower that Dallas Curry took pictures of Claire Grant at, so she gets the location from him. And when Nancy and George get there, Oliver Snell and Pamela Kane are struggling on top of the tower, and Pamela's wig and glasses fall off, and lo and behold, she's Claire Grant. So Nancy hits Oliver over the head with a flashlight, and they call the police. So basically, to sum this mystery up, Oliver Snell hated Dallas Curry so much that he wanted to ruin his career, and Claire Grant's disappearance was to try and get an acting part. She was just trying to get an acting part this entire time. Who does this woman think she is? Gay Moreau? So now let's go on to a little section of the podcast that I like to call What's Cooking. So there was a ton of specific things mentioned in this book that Nancy ate or other people ate. There was toast, lobster, coffee, steak and seafood, milkshakes, mugu gai pan and tea, poached eggs and orange juice, roast beef, gravy, and mashed potatoes, iced tea, marshmallow fudge sundae, that sounds really good, and hamburgers and salad. Now onto the things that I think that Nancy could add to her resume. So I wrote down that I couldn't really think of anything else that Nancy could add to her resume, unless you want to say Nancy's good at endangering her boyfriend because she almost mowed Ned down with a car. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the things I liked and didn't like about the mysterious image. So I liked the Nancy and Bess teamwork in this book. Nancy and Bess worked together a lot, and George was just kind of off to the side, which I kind of preferred. I mean, she almost fell off that bridge and then we didn't see her for a little while in the book. I also liked the psychology in this book. That was kind of interesting, but the things I didn't like, it just kind of dragged to me. And Pamela Kane / Claire Grant / Sylvia Salmo, I feel like she was just kind of a cheap imitation of Gay Moreau from the Lilac Inn mystery. I feel like Gay Moreau sets a high bar, you know? So yeah, when it comes to giving this book a rating, I would probably give it 1 magnifying glass. It just wasn't one that I really connected with. I thought that it dragged. It just wasn't one that really hit all those notes of a good mystery to me, personally. So yeah, that concludes today's episode. For next week's episode, we're going to jump into the Emerald-Eyed Cat mystery. So if you like books where Nancy gets kidnapped and ends up in creepy haciendas in Colombia, kind of on the nose, or where she befriends friendly burros, then you're definitely going to like this mystery. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. Can't get enough of the podcast? Then check out my subscription series, True Drew Files, available on Apple and Spotify. For Nancy Drew books and merchandise, you can check out my website, www.truedrewpodcast.com. For business inquiries, you can contact me at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at True Drew Podcast.